Bit of a different one today. This is an image like many photos in the 70s that have this horrible discoloration, quite often on one side of the image. Also, for some reason, there's a lot of hairs on this negative. So first thing to do is to straighten the image. So I'll just do my normal process, use the ruler tool, find something like the ocean, because we all know it's nice and flat. Square up the image like this. Now there isn't too much wrong with the sides. There hasn't rotated that much, so we can pretty much just paint them and they will fix themselves. I want to be careful I don't lose that little sparkle. Now I'm going to create a new layer, set that to colour. So what that'll allow me to do is just paint directly onto the image, sample colours from elsewhere in the picture, and then change the colour. So you can see I'm sampling some of the blue of the sky, and then I'll paint that colour with a fairly low opacity and start to paint the colours of the sky. Now what's interesting is, because this image is so grainy and there's so much noise in the colour, when you sample, you're sampling a single pixel. So that colour may not be exactly the colour you want. See here, that was very peachy, that colour. So how do you actually sample a colour that represents the basic colour of the sky? So I'll duplicate this layer and I'm going to destroy it. I'm going to make a little selection and go to filter, and under blur there's average, and what average does is it takes all the color pixels in that spot and gives you the average color in that square. So I can do that to a few spots on this layer and go average and then get the average color. Then going back to my painting layer, I can sample those colors, turn off that layer that I put the average blurs onto, and then using that color I get a good average color for the blue for that sky. And just repeating that process, although there's so much colour and colour variation in the ocean. I think I start this way, but I abandon it pretty quickly. So you don't want the ocean to get too monochrome like that. So I start sampling in different areas. You can see there on the extreme right of frame is my little dog making his way to the boat. Fair bit of a purpley cast there in the centre, and I'll come back later and correct the luminance of that. So with all that done, getting the spot heal tool, we can start to address on the bottom layer all those hairs that are on the negative. Now, I can do the sky that way, but if I use the heal tool, what it does is it allows me to sample one part of the clean sky and to paint that texture elsewhere. But you can see it's a much darker circle, and when I stamp it down, it samples the luminance and the colour of what's underneath it. So it's a good way to get even grain over something like a sky very quickly. It's quite an amazing little tool and quite underused, I think. So I've very quickly cleaned up all of that, all of those spots and hairs. Now this little line here, there's a blue line and a faint yellow line. They don't belong. So using the same tool, you can see I'm trying to paint that line out, but it doesn't do a great job. It's okay, but you can kind of still see the line in there. So rather than paint and try and eventually destroy that area of the image, I'm just going to go to the old clone tool, very old clone stamp tool, one of the first tools for Photoshop image retouching that they developed, and simply paint the pixels that are just above the line down onto the line, sampling where the cross is and painting on where the circle is. Okay, moving on to the neural filters, I'm going to see if I can reduce some of the grain in the image. So clicking on photo restoration, you can see immediately the image is a lot cleaner. But it's kind of made a little bit too much of creeping in on the edges of the figures on the boat. Just a little too sharp for my taste, but I do like the way it's degrained the image. So making sure I save to a new layer, I'm going to save out that adjusted, degrained version of the image. Do another one, this time with more of a correction, and then really just carefully paint back around the figures in the boat to the older, less sharpened version of the image, just to preserve their outlines a little. It's pretty subtle, but I think it makes a difference. Now by adding a layers section, I want to address the bright spot on the hull of the boat. So I'm going to set it fairly dark. I'll take the mask and set it to black so it clears its effect, and then use a very soft, large brush just to paint that layers adjustment in on that area. Make some final adjustments in the layer. Pretty happy with that. Next, I'll collapse all that down. And something I like to play with a little bit is, that wasn't tried an autocorrect color, but it did not help. So I'm going to set the contrast a little bit on this final image and then play a little bit with the vibrance. Just crank it up a bit, brighten up the colors a little bit. And of course, being me, I'm not entirely happy with some of the colours in the water. So one more pass, one more layer set to colour. I actually find some of the purpley colours hard right down the bottom a little much. And there you have it. Not an amazing image, but one that means something to our family, which is all the reason I need to want to restore it.